Broadcasting to the world, this is On Call with Chad McCall. In our show, we bring you inspiration, strategies, and insights on how to start, grow, and scale your business.
It's drastically changed my life.
The show is so informative, I just love it. It's honest. It's helped me grow as a person.
Real talk about life, lifestyle, society, and living limitless. Learning from the top influencers across the world, along with industry experts, authorities for you to live your greatest life. It's time to level up.
I'm ready.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Here's your host, best-selling author and mentor, Chad McCall.
Welcome to another episode of On Call with Chad McCall, where every episode, my goal is to make an impact in your life and your business. I have unscripted and never rehearsed conversations with powerful guests in all industries. They share their experiences, their tips, tricks that have changed their life and their business. This season 3 is full of CEOs, influencers, and experts that will give you real advice on how to grow. Today, I'll be calling an expert investor, entrepreneur, land mogul, best-selling author, and he's been featured on almost every major network out there, John Alexander. I have so many things I wanted to talk to him about, but I had to choose just one topic for today. And we're going to be talking about something important. It's protecting yourself. Many of you might not realize how important being invisible really is as an entrepreneur. In today's society, people see everything, including your competitors. The greedy lawsuit, happy plaintiffs, and their lawyers is something that you need to be aware of. Be ready. You got to be protected. If you've got liens, bankruptcies, whatever, it doesn't really matter. You can also be an entrepreneur still. And we're going to talk to John and see what he has to say about that. So get ready, hang tight while I get John Alexander on the line.
Hello, Chad.
Hey, John, how are you? Oh, man, it's good to have you on the podcast. I have just gave you a quick little intro about you, but I just want to make sure, how are you right now in Texas? You've gotten some crazy weather down there. Tell me, are you frozen?
Good to be with you today. We're not frozen anymore, but most of us are still kind of like fixing pipes and stuff, including myself. But, it's just one of the things that we all have to get used to.
Yeah, I don't think, I've ever heard of it, what happened that just happened there. Wow, crazy times. Well, we just got through a crazy 2022. So you know what? Why not an ice storm in Texas, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just keep piling on. We can take it.
Got it. So, John, all the listeners right here, some may know you, some may not. I mean, I go way back from just following you for over 20 years as being an entrepreneur and being out there as a real estate investor in fellow fields and, a colleague. Give us a little bit of background of yourself for those that may not know you, John, where you came from and how you got started becoming an entrepreneur.
Sure. I started, I grew up on a farm, so I was like a farm boy. We did cattle and we did farming, so kind of a combo of both. And over those years, my father, basically rented this land, which we then farmed and put our cattle on. Eventually, he became older and we kids grew up, so that was no longer an option. And so he started buying and selling the same property and land that we'd farmed our whole lives. And a few years after I left home and did some businesses and stuff, and I just sold my first furniture store, I moved back down to where he lived. And he said, you know what, take some of that money and invest it in this land deal that I'm doing. And I said, well, you know what? I've got nothing to lose. It was pretty easy to make money, when you're operating your business. So that's, our mentality of business owners. Well, yeah, we'll take the risk and see what happens. So I did. And in less than 30 days, I had made over $130,000 in profits. Now that would be paid out to me over time because we did a lot of owner finance notes in order to put that together. But that literally changed my life right there. And so I went on from there, and we just continued to build out subdivisions and sell land up until about 85, 86. Right in there, we started building, and we did the building until we basically got crushed in the 1987 crash. So now this is the first time I'm seeing, hey, listen, all my assets, I just lost all my assets. All right, so that that was the first lesson actually for what eventually became this book that I've written on how to protect those assets. But from there, I had to rebuild again. It's slow, but you do it. And then kind of got into flipping at that point, and then I started training people how to flip real estate in the early '90s. And then that went on pretty much all the way to the crash in 2009, where once again I was prepared for the crash because I learned how to protect my assets, but I didn't prepare for the other thing that happens on crashes, and that's people get lawsuit crazy and they start looking for people with a lot of money to sue to see how much of their stuff they can take. So I got hit there, and I learned the rest of the lessons, which eventually I put into this book, hoping hoping that other real estate investors won't make the same mistakes I made, and just kind of passing on what I learned through the process. Because the lawyers weren't really helpful. They all told me, "Yeah, you just need an LLC, you'll be protected." Okay, that's the first lie that I had to get past. That LLC is so easy to penetrate, especially if you are a individual investor.
Well, John, what you're saying right here now, there's some nuggets for anybody that's an entrepreneur and that's listening right now, or maybe they're just sitting on the fence to become an entrepreneur. So what I want to tell you is pay attention to what John just said. He was, in the 80s, his dad got him into a real estate deal. He took advice, he took a step, he did something, he got started, made over six figures in his first thing. Then a crash happened in the 80s. Now, if those of you that don't realize that the 2009 crash wasn't the first one, maybe that's the first one that most of you have seen in your lifetime. John has seen two of those in his lifetime. We never see a market correction. Usually, each person as a business owner and entrepreneur, you usually see one during your life of a business owner. And John has seen two already. He's seen the bad and the good that can come from two of those, which that's from 40 years of being an entrepreneur, not from 10, like a lot of people out there at YouTube University or emptypockets.com, those type of sites out there. Those are people giving you real world advice from the last 5-6 years on an incline, which anybody can make money when the market's going up, right, John? This is from actually blood, sweat, and tears, and saying, hey, you know what? I've seen what can happen bad. I was prepared for the next one, but even though you were prepared, you still had something you had to learn from that market crash in '09, right? And then now you wrote about it.
I certainly did, and it literally took everything that I had. So once again, I had to start from scratch and start building back again. So what I started to do at that point was just try to figure out, how. I knew I could come back because I've come back from these crashes before, and I've seen other people in business. Every true entrepreneur can come back from a crash if they just because they already have the knowledge, and they can just reapply that and figure out the changes that need to be done, and they can come back. So that's not such a big deal. But we're trying to obviously try to prevent that from happening, because it can take you years to come back from it. And so right after that, I just really got into lifestyle. What kind of lifestyle I wanted, and I had, from everything I've learned through my entire career, I decided to just concentrate on land itself. It's the simplest type of transaction in the real estate field that I think anybody can do. That as far as the complexity is a lot simpler. So I wanted a simple life, and I'm getting up in age. Sort of like what my father did, and I'm now seeing, we want more simple everything, but we still kind of need the same amount of money. So some restructuring went in there, and so I settled into the land, and I've been doing that for the last 7 years now, and it's been awesome. Unfortunately, we've had the COVID took out so many businesses, but it actually helped the land business, and actually just premium prices right now for land, which actually happens a lot. Every time we have a market crash, I do notice that land prices don't really, they're not affected the same, because it's not credit based. So that's another reason why I like it. But what I did learn was that, and from even the 2009 crash, I had told a lot of the people I mentor and help, kind of time to sell the assets. And those that held on because they were accumulating a lot of assets, they held on through that. And then, they ended up one, either losing it in the crash, or two, they got sued somehow, some way. So you can be a landlord, for example, and suddenly lawsuits start coming at you, or you can be an owner of a lot of property and things go bad. And when people get desperate, they just start looking for who they can sue. So this was really the reason why I wrote this book. So one of the things that, and I started to mention it earlier, Chad, was that, you know, I guess the either lawyers or gurus or whoever they're telling people, and not just, this doesn't apply just to people with property. This applies to any business person. They tell you, well, you just need to get an LLC and put your assets in there. Sometimes they'll tell you to divide up some assets between different LLCs, and that will protect it. But you've got to look at those words, limited liability, because all it does is limit some liability under some circumstances. I mean, that's how far really it goes. But it doesn't really protect you. Really nothing. I'm going to say this and then I'll qualify it, Chad. Really nothing. There's really nothing that will protect your assets 100% if they're inside of America. All right. So that's the starting premise. So if there's nothing that will absolutely protect your assets, whether it's from lawsuits or these other types of things that can happen, what do? Well, what you can do is you can build walls that slow the person who's trying to sue you down. It's like, for them, it's like walking in mud. And it just makes it so hard to sue you that they'd rather go sue somebody else that's a lot easier to sue. And that's where the ideas of using living trust, it really comes into play. It's basically taking even an LLC and starting to build walls around that LLC to make it harder for a lawsuit happy plaintiff to come at you. It just makes it way too hard for them to really, what it does, it makes it way too expensive. So if you structure it right, you can build multiple walls around your LLC or a corporation, and that's how you start to protect yourself. You just make it too hard for them to sue you.
Now, you mentioned something, John, like when markets have things happening, and it's not just for real estate, it's any business, right? When a market shifts, it impacts businesses, people, right? Society, everything happens. And people out of desperation do desperate things, or, attorneys do things for other people, and it puts us as entrepreneurs or business owners potentially in jeopardy. And in protecting, being prepared, it's not that we want this to happen, but we never know what could possibly happen. And I get questions asked like that all the time, and everybody has to give you, you have to say, I'm not going to give you legal advice because this, all right? We have to give some disclaimer. But what it really is how to protect yourself and your business from a potential problem, becoming a little bit more invisible. I mean, that was kind of what you wrote about in the book, talking about how to be invisible, and so the importance of that. And let's say if I wanted to become invisible, let's say I'm completely, elementary knowledge of this, what I'm thinking, this is going to be so expensive for me to do it, John. Like, oh, it's going to be so expensive for me to protect myself. I just have one rental, or my business is, a new little business I'm starting up. Okay. Because there's some people who only been in business for 20, 30 years doing 7-8 figures, but there's also some people that are just getting ready to start their LLC, and they're going to get scared. And they're like, oh gosh, I'm worried about starting having to protect myself. What advice would you give to the new people?
Well, actually, this is probably why it's not sold a lot by, legal firms and companies out there, because the cost of creating a legal trust is about $6 where I live, because all it is really notarizing a document, the living trust. And that document that I use is a 2-page document. So now that we're getting into some of the legal side of it, let me make a quick disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving any legal advice, but I'm giving some business advice here. So, if you are trying to protect like assets like your home, then you should definitely have a lawyer look at it. If you have any assets that are substantial, you should have an attorney look at drawing up that trust for you. But If it's for a smaller piece of property or smaller asset, let's say under 100,000, and oftentimes it's not needed. That you have to have something that is officially drawn up. There's plenty of books out there that you can actually get that will show you how to draw up a living trust, including mine. I include the files when you get the book. You can actually you can get some doc formatted uh, files with it, which allows you to then edit it pretty easily. So the cost is really uh, minimal to create the trust, and you can then layer the stuff that actually does cost money, which are the LLCs and your corporations and stuff. So now you can place those technically as the trustor of that trust. I'll just get technical with you for just a second here, but I explain it all in the book. But the person who really owns the property and really basically pays the taxes on that property, they're called the trustor. They basically in effect own the trust. And then you have a trustee. That's a different person usually, and that's a person who's more public, and they can hold this property in their name in public records, therefore shielding or hiding the true owner, which is your LLC or you, depending on how you have the ownership of the assets. So that's the idea behind using a living trust, to hide what you own from the general public, basically. So if you have an LLC, and anybody can just go onto the state board, the Secretary of State, look you up, and get all the information they need to sue you and go after your assets, because doing a simple search on your LLC name. So you can do a statewide search. Lawyers can do a U.S. Wide search and find any assets that corporation or LLC owns, and then go after that. But when you now hide that behind a trust, they have to know, first of all, they have to know the name of the trust. So it's hard to get that. Well, it's impossible to get that until after you've been sued and the questions come up later, like in a deposition or something. That's when they first might get wind of, that you have additional assets. But by then you have, there's other options, which I go through in the book. But the whole idea is, first of all, to look like you don't have any assets at all. So if, let's say you have an LLC and they do a search on it and they don't see anything filed of public record, that you have assets, because between you and I, those are all being held in these trusts. They don't have the name of the trust, so they can't do a search on that. Therefore, they're saying, well, this person has an LLC, but it doesn't look like he owns anything. Are you sure you want to go forward with a lawsuit? So that's the first little step. There's more to it, but this is the idea behind it.
Oh, and I love that, because, and this is something that I use as well, John, because, being out there, investing, owning properties in multiple states, just like you do, we have these trusts for that purpose. Because some people say, oh, we look up your corporation, we don't see anything. Well, I'm glad you don't see anything, right? I mean, we actually want that to be the case. Like, you don't see anything, because it's going to look like, well, you're an entrepreneur, but you don't hold a lot of assets. And that's the idea of being invisible. Yeah, that we have a limited thing, like maybe our personal residence, if we needed to leave that outside of a trust. But many of us out there in the entrepreneur space, especially in the real estate investors, we're going to look like we have minimal to zero because of protection. And that's the goal. Anyone listening, if you are real estate, then that's the way you want to look. Because if people know you're in real estate, if you're a landlord and you want to get sued, guess what? They're going to look at is how many properties do you own, right? Is this property in with other properties? If a lawsuit ties up one property and you've got a bunch into one LLC, they all pretty much are at risk, right, John?
That's correct. So again, now we're dividing up properties that are owned by you. So let's say, for example, you do own a property, you're a landlord, and you get sued. Well, they can maybe go after that. For example, it might be held now from their standpoint. They might see it being held in a trust, and so they just sue that trust. And that trust basically is limited to the assets of that trust. So it's kind of like the idea of an LLC. So it's limiting that to just that, and they can't now go after other properties that you may have under certain circumstances they can. I'm gonna preface that if there's kind of fraud or some kind of crime involved, then yeah, everything's open. But if it's the typical civil stuff, then it can be pretty well sectioned in there. Now, the other great thing about having your assets in trust is at tax time, Chad. So the IRS rules are that the IRS says basically in their paperwork, don't even mention that you have a trust to us. Just take the trust property, income, expenses, whatever you incurred connected to that, and filter it down to the trustor, because it's the trustor that files the taxes and pays all based upon that. So if your LLC is a trustor, then it's the LLC that's filing their taxes just like they normally would. So basically, this is great because the trust effectively disappears at tax time, so you're not having to be concerned with that. So on the other side, it costs maybe $6 to file the paperwork, or actually to get it notarized. You actually never file the living trust anywhere. It's basically just off the book. So it's similar in some ways to what some investors will say is a land trust. It's similar to that. It's not filed anywhere. And so it's just on a deed, for example, or the ownership of the asset will be owned by that trust and the appointed trustee.
So anyone that's an entrepreneur, right, listening right now, regardless of what business you're in, John and I just happen to love real estate, properties. That's just our jam. Like, we love that. But anybody that's an entrepreneur, John, like, just if you could sum it up in one sentence, why someone needs to understand the importance of being invisible and having a living trust, what would you say in one little sentence?
Well, I'm going to say this first before I give you the one sentence. There's a lot of reasons why you should have a living trust, including, for example, even if you had a lien against you, you can continue in business without having those liens attached to your other assets that you're picking up. It goes on and on, the benefits of working under a living trust. But the greatest thing I think about the living trust is it adds this level of protection to the assets that you have worked so hard to accumulate and can so easily be taken away in simple lawsuit. Sometimes you can even win that lawsuit, but you had to essentially sell all your assets in order to fund the lawsuit. I've seen that happen too. So there's so many ways you can lose your assets once they find them and start to go after them. So let's keep it invisible. It's the greatest thing of being invisible. And Chad, we didn't even get into how you can also hide what you're doing from your competitors who might be in the real estate business, or they might say, where's this company buying at right now? Oh, they're buying this land over here. Well, if you do it under trust, they can't see that. It's invisible.
By me asking you that one sentence, you got both of my next things I was going to ask you. You kind of threw the teasers out there, because the first was going to be, if there are business owners right now and you're an entrepreneur, real estate investor, whatever it may be, 2020's happened, or maybe the last crash has happened. Something may have happened hard to you in your life. Liens, if you have current liens against you, or bankruptcy and those things, you can still operate and do this and do business, John, right? Like you mentioned, you just teased that for a second. I think some people need to know that. Some people think the world's over, like they're just finished because they have outstanding liens or bankruptcy or something like that. And you just mentioned a quick little piece. I want them to get the book so they can learn about it, but just let them know that it's not over, right?
Well, absolutely. It does stop so many people, but and the setup is so simple. You're simply creating a trust. You can put an LLC together, or you could just put it in your wife's name, or your son's name, or your husband's name, whoever that you're paired up with. Okay, so that's the true owner, and you as a trustee can then go back in there and start buying and selling, doing whatever you do, run your business, do everything, and you're just a trustee earning maybe $50 a year doing that while being totally protected against because no liens will attach to a trustee. It only can attach to the owner or basically the owner of record of that property.
Rewind it just a little bit and listen to that piece again, because I get those questions a lot. As people like, well, I'm not going to start right now all because of this, or I'm worried about starting because of that. So that's a huge nugget right there, John, a huge one. And then now you also brought up something really important, competition. I know, and I'm keeping you longer than I wanted to, but I have to just, touch on that. It's people watch what we do. Like, I know people are watching what you do because land really has never been my thing because I just never understood the process of land and buying and selling it because it's like you said, it's really it's almost like a cash world out there in the land. It's different than houses, and I've done houses forever. But then if I'm going to do land, you start watching the people that do land. You start doing things, and like your competition starts to really dive in, especially like in real estate, residential properties and stuff. And that people watch where I go and where I'm buying at, and I like to hide so people don't know everywhere where I'm going, just like you do. So tell everybody the importance of how this helps shield you from everybody watching you and following you and just waiting to see what you're doing.
Well, and that's so important because sometimes you find these great areas. Like I'll find this like a subdivision, for example. And so I'll start buying in this subdivision and I can literally buy there sometimes for years. But it doesn't really matter, whether you're doing land or you're doing houses or something. Once you find your little money pit, let's call it, and it could be a whole section that you found in a town, for example, or wherever it might be, then you're basically having to put your name on paperwork in that area. So it gets filed at some point, and then your competitors can simply do a search on your name, which, by the way, I do this to my competitors. This is kind of why right away I was saying I don't want this to happen to me, which led to this as well. So I can then so once you're buying in this area, you don't want anybody to see what you're doing in there, and just by again using a trust, so you can it'll be the ownership of that property or whatever was filed, even if it's a memorandum that a lot of investors use. That's a name, and they can search that name and find out where you are working at, what you're doing. So when you put a trust name on there, so it's ABC Trust. Now suddenly they don't know what to search. They don't know that name. So unless they find out what that name is, and they're only going to really find out if you tell them what it is, then they can't search it. So they don't know where you're buying. You just completely disappeared off their radar, even though they know the name of your LLC, even though they know your name. Those things don't get recorded into public record. Now, there's one more layer to this. Let's say, for example, you're the trustee, and now your name is going on a legal document. So you want your name not to go on that legal document because, again, they can search your name, not only your competition, but lawyers as well. So how do you get rid of the trustee name off the legal documents? Now, again, I go into detail in the book on that, but I'm going to tell you right now how to do that. You appoint what is called a nominee trustee. So that is a person that you bring in temporarily just to sign those documents, and then they're out. They have no longer signing abilities at all, and you're back as full trustee. So it's basically just writing an extra line on your trust that says, you're maintaining, you obviously are the trustee for the trust, but for this transaction, we nominate a person's name as the nominee trustee to complete this transaction and legally can sign. That's it. So it's very similar to an LLC or a corporation where you have a resolution that gives permission to one of your officers or secretary or something to sign off on paperwork. That this is the same thing, but on the trust side. So so it's just another great, easy way of being able to get paperwork done, and you're just totally off the public record.
Oh my gosh, guys, please pay close attention to what John just shared with you. That is I don't even know if I can call that a 6-figure savings for someone's business, a 7-figure. It's whatever. It's a priceless savings for your company, the life of your business right there. If you just pay close attention to the last 9 minutes of us talking here on this episode. So pay very, very close attention. John, you gave us tons of information. People's heads right now are spinning a little bit. I've even wrote more notes down too while we're talking. But for everyone that wants to get a copy of this book, how can they do that?
They can go to my website at reilivingtrust.com. You can also go to my webpage, my homepage, which has all my books because I have really a lot of different books on real estate investing and mindset and everything else at johnalexander.com. So it's just my name.com.
So, John, thank you for carving out a little bit of the time for me today. We're going to be back on here. I've got so many other things that we can talk about. I had to pick something, and we just started talking. We never know where these are going to go, but I just really appreciate you being available to do this. We've been wanting to do this for a while, and we finally got on. So I just want to say thank you so much for your time and your wisdom.
I really appreciate you asking me on your podcast, man. You're just taking off with this thing, and I just enjoy watching it. And I also admire you. You've just done incredible things in your life as well. Let's keep it going.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, but before I let you go, John, I got to ask you my top 3 questions. Are you ready?
Oh, no. Okay, go.
All right. First one. What was the last song that you were listening to?
Oh, okay. It was Pink Floyd, the entire album, which is, I guess, one song, The Dark Side of the Moon.
Next one. What is your pet's name?
Oh, I just got 2 new pets, 2 kittens that I've fallen so much in love with already so quickly, and their names are Remy and Toby.
Last one. What's your favorite movie?
My all-time favorite movie and movie that I have watched more than any other movie, believe it or not, is Groundhog Day. I love that movie. At one point, I started asking myself, why do I love it? And I thought that, you know what, it shows how we don't just get one chance at something. We get multiple chances at doing it over and getting it right. And, if you do it and you learn enough along the way, ultimately you get your dream.
Yeah. And it's funny enough that is your favorite movie that you've watched more times than anything because of the movie, what it's about. I've watched the same thing over and over, but I keep watching the same movie over and over and over.
And I never watch a movie more than once, generally. That's my rule.
Well, John, thank you again for today. I really appreciate your time. And listeners, hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure that you click the link below, get a copy of John's book. And it's great. It'll save you so much in life and your business. Like today's episode adds tons of value to both. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And John, don't forget, you're always on call.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember, friends, you are always on call.